The story of the 3rd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, has its beginning in New Guinea. In 1945, the 6th, 6th and 11th Divisions, thereby inheriting the traditions which had been so proudly established in the deserts of the Middle East and the jungles of the Southwest Pacific. After training at Morotai, the 67th Battalion sailed for Japan in 1946 to form a part of the British Commonwealth Occupation Force. The battalion served with distinction, providing the first Australian troops to enter Tokyo. It took part in the first Anzac Day parade in Tokyo and mounted the first Australian Guard on the Imperial Palace. For 3 years running, the battalion won the Duke of Gloucester Cup. In November 1948, the 67th Battalion was reconstituted as the 3rd Battalion. 1949, the prefix Royal was granted to the regiment. With the coming of 1950, the battalion was preparing to return to Australia when, in July, the Korean War broke out. At a battalion parade, the call was made for volunteers for Korea. As one man, the unit stepped forward. The tradition was being worthily upheld. Throughout 4 long and bitter years in Korea, the battalion remained constantly in the front line, being the only one of all the United Nations units to do so. During this period, the battalion, the Fighting Third, or Old Faithful as it became known, from its habit of always turning up when it was most needed, not only upheld the great traditions which had been handed on to it from World War II, but went on to create a new and lasting tradition of its own. With the signing of the armistice in July 1953, the battalion had a chance to relax, but much remained to be done, and it was not until the end of 1954 that Old Faithful was free to return to Australia. A bitter breeze was blowing from the north as the battalion paraded for the last time in the 1st Commonwealth Division area. The salute was taken by the General Officer Commanding, Major General Murray, and the parade was commanded by the CO of the 3rd Battalion, Colonel Butler. In his address, General Murray referred to the unit's distinguished record. During service in Korea, decorations won included 4 DSOs, 17 military crosses, 29 military medals, 6 OBEs, 3 MBEs, 4 DCMs, a George Medal, and various foreign orders. In addition, the unit was awarded a United States Presidential Citation for its gallant stand at Cap Yong. No wonder they call it the Fighting Third. On the 6th of November, the trucks rolled south across the 38th parallel from the camp area, which the Australians had occupied since the cessation of hostilities. At the railhead of Tok Chon, they entrained for Pusan on the first stage of the long journey home. The band of the 1st Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, which was staying behind, was there to play them on their way. As the train moved slowly away, General Murray and Brigadier Murdoch, Commander 28th Britcom Infantry Brigade, waved farewell. But one final duty remained before embarking. On the hills above Pusan lies the United Nations War Cemetery, and there the men of the 3rd Battalion paused to do homage to their fallen comrades. The memorial service was conducted by Colonel Lang, the chaplain who served with the unit when it first went to Korea. Here were remembered those of Old Faithful who would not be going home. In the docks below, the New Australia was waiting. This was the port where, just over 4 years earlier, the battalion had first set foot in Korea. In those 4 years, it had collected battle honors and established a fighting record unequaled in the United Nations forces. Wherever the fighting was hottest, wherever help was most desperately needed, the Fighting Third was always there. Colonel Butler went aboard, and soon the gap between shore and ship was widening. The 3rd Battalion was going home after 9 years of continuous service overseas. Years during which it had created and upheld a great tradition of its own. Home to Australia, where the crowds were waiting to give it welcome. As the New Australia steams down the Queensland coast, a Royal Australian Air Force aircraft dips in welcoming salute. In Brisbane, at Hamilton Wharf, friends and relatives are waiting as the New Australia comes alongside. This is an historic occasion, for it is here that the 3rd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, sets foot for the first time on Australian soil. Other crowds are already lining the route of the march, as the Governor-General field march arrives at the saluting base. The guard is provided by the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, which had returned from Korea 8 months previously. Rain fails to dampen the enthusiastic welcome from the crowd as the parade, led by Colonel Butler, swings its way through the city streets. In the march, the battalion is joined by former members who are now serving in Northern Command. Also taking part are the 16th Field Regiment of the Royal New Zealand Artillery, who served alongside the Australians in Korea and who are returning on the New Australia. In front of the Shrine of Remembrance in Anzac Square, the parade forms up in the pattern of the rising sun. Here, the Governor-General presents the battalion with a casket on behalf of the 8th Royal Irish Hussars. This casket commemorates the affiliation between the two units, which was forged on the battlefields of Korea. In many of its most bitter battles, the 3rd Battalion was supported by the Centurion tanks of the 8th Hussars. After the march, the men of the fighting 3rd re-embark in the New Australia to continue the voyage to Sydney. At Circular Quay, which has seen so much of Australian history, the New Australia comes alongside. The men are soon ashore to greet their friends and families before falling in for the march through the city streets. The battalion's first official act in Sydney is the laying of a wreath on the cenotaph in Martin Place. It is in Martin Place also that Sydney turns on its traditional ticker-tape welcome in tribute to the distinguished tradition of the 3rd Battalion, a tradition formed in the heat of battle, as in October 1950 the unit joined in the United Nations advance into North Korea. Within a month of their landing at Pusan, the Australians had reached within 30 miles of the Yalu River. With the death of Colonel Green, Major Ferguson took over and commanded the unit through the difficult days of the retreat. As they moved past the cenotaph, scene of so many Anzac Day commemorations, the men of the 3rd Battalion recall Anzac Day 1951 in a valley named Kap Yong. For their gallantry in this action, under the command of Colonel Ferguson, the battalion was awarded the United States Presidential Citation. Spring gave way to summer, and while the unit kept watch above the Imjin River, Colonel Hassett took over command. Even Father Christmas comes out to give the battalion a wave as it moves on down George Street to the Town Hall, where the salute is taken by the Governor, General Sir John Northcote. Christmas 1952 in Korea saw the successful attack on Little Gibraltar, which was led by Colonel Hughes, and the unit, now under the command of Colonel MacDonald, was still in possession when the armistice was signed in July 1953. The march is over and the men disperse on leave. Across the continent, the welcome is repeated. In Melbourne, the salute is taken by General Sir Sidney Rowell, as yet again Australians pay tribute to one of their most famous fighting units, the 3rd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, whose distinguished achievements in Korea, at Chongju, Little Baldy, the Imjin River, Operation Commando, and Little Gibraltar are truly in a great tradition.